Pop quiz. What are the 100 biggest infrastructure projects in all of Canada? Well, in a special episode of the Digging In podcast, we're going to find out. I sat down with John Tenpenny, editor of Renew Canada, one of our sister publications, to chat about this year's top 100 projects list, and it's been tracking major infrastructure projects for decades. So here's what he had to say about the stories and the data behind this year's list and some of the interesting trends that have emerged. Enjoy. All right. Welcome back to the Digging In podcast. I'm your host, Site News editor Russell Hixson, and I have a special guest joining me from the big city of Toronto. John, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Russell, for having me. This is a great opportunity. I'm the editor of Renew Canada, as well as Water Canada magazines, with the newly formed and created Site Media Group that we're both now a part of, and very excited to be working alongside you now.
Likewise. And we've had a lot of big announcements, I feel like, with Site Media over the last few days, but we had a major announcement with the top 100 projects list. And I was hoping you could kind of walk me through what that list is and what it entails.
Sure. The top 100 projects report has been going since 2004, when it was started by the formerly known entity as Actual Media. I've been with Renew the past 5 years, so this is my, I believe, sixth report that I put out. So basically, it is the top 100 public infrastructure projects in Canada, and it is listed by project value. And we have 5 main categories: buildings, energy, transit, transportation, and our other category, which includes things like remediation projects, water and wastewater, and communications projects.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about how you and your team go about building this list? I'm always curious, how long does it take? What is the effort that goes in, kind of behind the scenes?
Well, it's a year long. It goes on all year. It never really stops. Even though the report comes out in January, each year we start usually around August by sending out. We have a fairly comprehensive list of companies, construction, engineering firms, design firms, and things like that we send out a prospective list for the upcoming report with all the projects that are currently on the list, and as well as new projects that have come up during the past year. And we invite them to let us know which ones they're working on and what they're doing. And then on the other side, I reach out to all the owners of the major projects and get them to submit information on the projects, from dollar value to all the companies that they know are working on the projects, and timelines and descriptions, as well as getting them to send us some nice high-res photos that we can use online and in the report. And then from there, we compile it right up until early December, when we get it ready and put it on a website. We also have a digital edition of the entire report put together. We sent out a few printed copies, but as we both know, these days print is not as widely requested. So most people access this report on the website, where they can interact, and you can do things like type in a company name, and it'll show you all the projects that they're listed on, as well as the digital edition, where people can look at the entire report in its entirety, from 1 to 100.
So you've been doing this for years now. What are some of the themes that have emerged kind of from this year's list that might be different than previous lists? What are some of the things that maybe stood out to you from this year?
Well, the big thing that stood out was the jump that the total made last year. The 2025 report totaled 100 projects, totaled $300 billion in value. This year we jumped to $343 billion, which was the largest single year jump in the 20 years that we've been doing this report. And that was largely due to the inclusion of a couple of new nuclear projects in Ontario, the Darlington new nuclear project and the Pickering refurbishment project. So I think the biggest theme was the the inclusion of more nuclear projects than we've had in a few years, and the value of those projects really bumped up our list, whereas everything else sort of remained the same. Transit is our biggest contributor to the list, nearly a quarter of the projects, and 123 billion of the total, which is the largest single total in those five major categories that I mentioned before.
Where is this work happening? I know for at least transit, a lot of it, the bulk of it is the GTA. I know in Vancouver here, where I'm based out of and I'm recording from. I mean, obviously we have like the Broadway subway and we have Surrey Langley, but I mean, I feel like that pales in comparison to some of the stuff that's going on out your way. Maybe give me an idea of kind of where some of these major projects are happening.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Russell. The majority of the transit projects, specifically in the subway and the LRT subcategories, are in the GTA. Things like the Ontario line, the Eglinton Crosstown West extension, um, the Hazel McCallion LRT out in the West End, the Scarborough subway extension, and one of the new projects this year, which is the Yonge North subway extension, which they're running from Finch subway up into Vaughan. Um, there's some others scattered. I mean, the Montreal's Blue Line Extension subway project is in the top 10. That's one of the largest projects outside of Ontario. And then you get into the rail projects, and a lot of those are GO Expansion has several large expansion projects that are built out as well. And new this year as well is the Alto high-speed rail project, which is new this year. Now, some people might look and say only 4.5 billion, and whereas everyone's saying it could cost up to 90 billion, but it's a project that's just gotten off the ground, and we're going by the value that has been put out in terms of a consortium contract and other things like that. And we know that over the years that project is going to continue to grow and grow as they add contracts and start building and start doing design work and things like that. So that project could be on our list for 10 or 15 years, and maybe it will top out at 90 billion. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of projects that people see come and go, like, obviously we have condos are kind of up and down and, some of these high rise, maybe a little bit of commercial. But what's different about these, these massive infrastructure projects? I know you just mentioned we're not looking at, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It could be on the list for, a decade and just billions and billions of dollars. What kind of separates some of these large mega projects from kind of your average day-to-day projects that me and you cover?
Yeah, well, like I said, they're not small. I mean, this year, 76, I believe it's 76 of the 100 projects start at $1 billion. Our lowest project is at 692, I believe. So every year, the bottom, so to speak, comes up as we add more and more larger projects. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's time. Like projects that start at $1 billion and go up to 29 billion, which is our number one project, take time. And things change. Budgets can go up. Timelines can extend because they're very complicated. Things like nuclear projects, large hospital projects like the Peter Gilligan Mississauga Hospital, which signed a big contract this year, and its value jumped up to $14 billion. They're complicated. They take time, and sometimes governments get involved, but generally it's just the complexity and awarding large contracts, whether they be one contract for an entire project, or sometimes they break them out into separate packages in order to make sure that things stay on time and on budget. So I think that's what differentiates these projects. As we say, this is Canada's biggest infrastructure projects, this list.
And I think you touched on something that I find particularly interesting because you track these all year. You're really immersed in this. Like, what are some of the trends you've seen in project delivery in terms of single contracts or bundling contracts, and what have been some of the outcomes? Because these are often we see these mega projects in the headlines, but what are you seeing from your vantage point?
Well, I think, certainly over the years that the list has been around. P3, when this list first started, would have been the big delivery model, and that's kind of changed. There's still P3 projects, but some of those have sort of evolved into other delivery models, like with collaboration and things like IPD, things like um, design, build, finance, operate, maintain, alliance projects, things like that are really, there's a wider range of delivery model types, as well as I mentioned before, and you just did, some particularly transit. I've seen the trend in Ontario that they used to put out contracts for large transit projects, one single contract to build tunnels, build stations, lay track, install technology. And now some of the current projects have been packaged out, where there's a contract just to build tunnels, and then there's another contract to build the stations and lay the rail. And I think that has been born out of some projects, which I guess we won't name, that everybody knows, that took a long time to complete and took a lot of more money than they thought originally. And I think part of that was a complicated project bundled into one contract. And now with some of the new transit projects being done, they're packaging those out. And I think that was a lesson learned. And from what I can tell, some of these transit projects in the early stages seem to be a little more sticking to timelines and budgets. We don't know. Every year they update budgets and things like that, and I'm sure budgets, just as time goes by, sometimes go up. But the timing of these projects, I think you will see that they become a little better being built on time as they package out things instead of doing one contract for a large transit project.
Yeah, but I guess with their long timelines of these projects, when you're kind of hanging in the breeze for, maybe a decade, that gives a lot of opportunity for kind of weird things to happen, like what we saw with the pandemic. We've seen with all sorts of, I don't know if you want to call them acts of God, but just like kind of random events that you have no control over. Kind of the longer your project goes on, the more rolls of the dice, so to speak, you have for something strange to happen, right?
Yeah, I think in this report, you're still seeing pandemic effects
Really?
in terms of budgets and timelines. I mean, the pandemic really shook up a lot of projects. I mean, there were, most projects, there was some times where they were just completely shut down for months during the early years, the early part of the pandemic. And then supply chains tightened. And so even when they came back to do some work on projects, if they had to order new supplies and building materials and things like that, the cost had gone up because of a tight supply chain. And I think a lot of projects came out of that with, obviously, the budgets had increased, the timelines had increased. So I think some projects are still working their way through that. I mean, they've gone past it, but I think, prices overall, I think in the construction industry have remained a little higher than they were pre-pandemic. So maybe with projects that have come on in the last year or two, that the budgets that you're seeing are based on a higher price of some of the construction materials and things they need to get. And so I think it's pandemic effects are not over, I think, in the construction industry when it comes to large mega projects being built.
Now, I'm curious about the Major Projects Office, which I guess is like a relatively new government entity policy. How is that impacting major infrastructure projects and, public and private? I guess this is mostly public, but it seems like every few weeks I see another project kind of doing their rolling out their campaign to try and vie for one of those spots. How do you think the Major Projects Office has impacted, some of the major infrastructure projects in Canada?
Well, I mean, the first thing is it's brought a lot of attention to these kind of projects, especially with the sort of lists they've come out with to say that these are the projects they want to start pushing through or or help get done first, and then there was another list. So things like, the Montreal Contrecoeur terminal is on our list, and that one has been added. And so something like that, a current project, it seems to me that projects like that are probably going to get done maybe a little quicker than they were before, because funding is going to come together quicker, or things like that, and they're going to make sure that the funding is in place so that their project can continue to be built. And then there's new projects, like the possibility of a lot of work being done in Churchill Port in Manitoba. And I think that could be a project that you might see on the list in the next year or two, if the Major Projects Office follows through on their plans. I think there are a lot of things that have to happen, but certainly by the government putting an onus and a priority on some of these projects, I think you're going to see some of them come to fruition a little quicker. So like I said, projects that aren't on the list coming up on the list in the next year or two, because of the push that Major Projects Office has done, and ensuring that the funding is there. So maybe you get clarity on funding on some of these large projects a little quicker than we have in the past because of the push from the government. So I think it's definitely going to be a big factor in the next few years as we enter this age, I guess you would call, of nation building. And for large public infrastructure projects, it's going to be a major boon, I think, in the coming years.
Yeah, I feel like more than in the past, leaders like I guess provincial leaders, project proponents have had to make a public case for why their project should be included. It should get the boost from the Major Projects Office, and therefore, I think the public ends up learning more about these projects where they might not have in the past. Which I think personally is probably good, because I think most people don't think about Churchill all that often, or the effect that a port or port upgrades might have. But now that the case has to kind of be made publicly, I think we're all learning a lot more about some of the major infrastructure projects that might get that boost.
Yeah, I think provincial governments and entities are going to have to fine tune their project parameters and their sort of pitch, if you want to call it, in order to qualify, or to get notice, or to get put on the list, or just to make sure that the Major Projects Office, puts it on their list, gets interested in it, and wants to be a part of it. I think the other thing I just thought of is, I think the Major Projects Office and this age we live in, with he who shall not be named, is defense and the Arctic. I think you're going to see more large infrastructure projects being built in the north. I know there's a big, I believe it's a communications line in the Northwest Territories area that's probably going to get pushed up by the MPO, and then a large defense we have a few military projects on the list, but I think in the next few years we might see some more, especially as they're building things in the Arctic to build up. I think defense spending and nation building is a high priority right now for the government. So I think you're going to see some of those kinds of projects maybe getting on the list in the next few years, as this whole thing gets going, building up momentum, I would say.
Yeah, we're recording this January 21st, and recent events, things are still developing. Global politics are shifting, and I totally agree. I think that Canada, it seems like the direction we're going in is we're moving away from some of our partners, finding new ones, and there's kind of a reshuffling of the deck here. And yeah, I guess I do believe that we're going to see much more of that kind of spending and development.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I just said, there, the way the world is shaping up, and our place in it, things are definitely changing. We're looking for partners outside of our neighbors to the south, and I think defense, like I said, is going to be a huge spend, and the government has already indicated that. So whether it's building bases or building roads and telecommunications and things in the Arctic, to make sure that our defense is properly maintained and increased, to be frank, I think is where we're headed. And other projects to support those kind of projects, I think, will be on the uptick, as well as energy and port projects that help us expand our export markets. So that's, as I mentioned, the Montreal Port Project. Roberts Bank is in Vancouver. I don't think that's currently on MPO, but I know they already have the funding. It's up to, I believe, $3 billion. And I'm sure projects like that will get increased government support and or scrutiny in order to make sure they're built. And as I said, Churchill Port is, I think, going to be a big one coming up.
So my burning question right now is who made the top spot? What's the number one?
Well, the number one project is the Pickering Generating Station refurbishment, owned by Ontario Power Generation, and that one clocks in at $26.8 billion.
And sorry, go ahead.
And the number two project is also a new project, as I mentioned before, the Darlington New Nuclear Project, the building of SMRs on the site of the Darlington nuclear plant. It comes in at $20.9 billion. So we've got two new projects that slot in right at the top of the list.
So what can you tell me about all this nuclear work? Because I don't live in Ontario, but just like through osmosis, I know a little bit. I think, what is it, 60% or something like that of Ontario's power is generated via nuclear?
Yes, I can't quote that number, but I think it's in that range, something like 50 to 60%, and that's going to continue. I think the provincial government here has, since we got out of coal a number of years ago, I think there is some hydro up in northern Ontario, but we don't quite have the capacity. I think that somewhere like Quebec and Newfoundland do in terms of pure hydropower. So I think they're putting their money in nuclear, and the refurbishment of Pickering, ultimately the 4 SMRs that are supposed to be built at Darlington, as well as Darlington's refurbishment is supposed to be done in the next year or two. We also have the Bruce Power Plant refurbishment, which has a couple of years left. And on the books now, they're talking about building a new reactor at Bruce, as well as a new reactor out near Port Hope. So we could see in the next number of years at least 2 new nuclear projects added to that list. So it really is just almost a phenomenon. But the provincial government here in Ontario has just decided that nuclear is the way they're going to fuel the province's energy needs for the next 40, 50, 100 years maybe, as well as I think a plan to, with all that nuclear, we'll have a chunk to export to places like Michigan and New York State, and if that's a possibility. And so, I think that's the big plan. But from what I hear as well, nuclear is starting to expand. Alberta and Saskatchewan have made sort of inroads in terms of talking about building nuclear and SMRs and setting up research and things like that. So I think in maybe the longer term, you could see some nuclear projects being built outside of Ontario, which currently there are none.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much chatter about, data centers and other things, and I feel like nuclear is really slept on. It seems like it's a really good time to be an expert in doing nuclear work, especially nuclear refurbishment. And as I understand, I think it's not just power. They also provide like medical isotopes and sterilization globally. I think Ontario is like one of the largest providers of certain really
Medical
critical
isotopes,
medical
yes.
isotopes. Yeah, for imaging and all sorts of other things. Correct.
Yeah, so I mean that I'm sure that will continue, and there are two sides. Obviously, it is clean energy in that it doesn't produce any emissions and things like that. You do have on the other end, nuclear waste that has to be dealt with, and some people think that is a no go on any new nuclear energy. But I mean, the government has obviously decided to take this route. Down the list, probably 5 years to 10 years before it even comes, is that the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, a federal government agency, is planning to build a deep geological repository in northern Ontario, and they're at the stage where they think they've picked the site and they're working on that, but it could take a number of years until that really like shovels in the ground. But once it is, that project could be a $40 to $50 billion project in the end. But it could take a while to get started, and it could take even longer to get completed. But that is on the radar, and I think with the fact that Ontario is building more nuclear facilities, that kind of project is definitely going to be needed, and so I think it will finally get started and done. But it could take a long time before that happens. But that's on the books as well.
I mean, I could talk about that for hours, because like the problem of nuclear the nuclear waste storage is fascinating to me, because it's not safe for humans for many years, long beyond our lifetimes and our grandchildren's lifetimes. So like how you design and build a facility like that is a very interesting and complex problem. But we don't have time to get all into that. I think wrapping up here, how can people get involved in the list? Maybe someone sees some of these projects and they participated and they want to share and celebrate their participation in some of these projects. What is the process like that for doing that, John? And how can people get in touch?
Yeah, great question, Russ. Yeah, every year as soon as the list comes out, I get emails and phone calls from companies saying, "Hey, we worked on this project. How come we're not listed?" And as I said at the beginning, we have a fairly large list of contacts that we send out every year, but that list grows every year. So if you're a company that has worked on some of these projects and you'd like to celebrate that and get on the list, the best way is to just reach out directly to me. You can go to the Renew Canada website or the Top 100 website, which is part of the Renew website, and contact me. My email is john@sitemediagroup.com, and I'm happy to take your emails and add you to our list and grow that list every year, so that as many companies that are involved in these great projects are recognized for that, and we continue to build that list every year. And next year we'll have even more companies listed on these 100 projects.
Well, I guess it's time to get started on next year's list, because you work on it
I
all
got to
year
duck
round.
out and get started on that. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much for joining me, John. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Russ. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
All right, take it easy.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed our chat with John. Thank you so much for listening. But before I sign off, I have to let you know we are throwing an awards gala for all our Site Service Awards finalists, and you're invited. There will be drinks, food, and anticipation as we prepare to announce the winner for each category. So if you want tickets, surf on over to siteserviceawards.com/event and get them before they're gone. Have a good one, everybody.